Hey audio geeks, and welcome back to the channel. Climate change has meant that it's been unbearably hot this past week here in the UK, and I've not been able to motivate myself to do that much. But today it's a little cooler, a little bit cloudier. You probably can't see the window, but you'll have to take my word for it. And in fact, it's much more like a typical English summer. Today we're going to be talking about a pair of sub $500, £500 open back headphones from a newish company, and that's always an exciting subject. Remember, this is a difficult segment of the audiophile market to break into, given that we already have some fantastic options from established big brands. The example that comes to mind, and my usual recommendation, is one of the Sennheiser 600 series headphones, and cans such as the HD600, the HD650, which is what I've got here, which I've had for a number of years, and latterly the 660S have long set the standard for neutral sounding reference level headphones at this sub £500 price point. However, there are also great and worthy options to consider from the likes of Beyerdynamic, AKG and Hi-Fi Man if planar magnetic drivers take your fancy. For example, the Hi-Fi Man Sundaras. I know you're probably fed up of hearing me going on about them. Here they are. At £300 is still, in my opinion, one of the best bargains in hi-fi. So yeah, lots of stiff competition for new companies. I was therefore intrigued when the folks at SIVGA, I hope I've said that right, which is a Chinese company, reached out and asked me to review their new top-of-the-line headphone, the SIVGA SV023. The usual disclaimers apply for this review. SIVGA kindly sent me a pair of the SV23s for evaluation, but they have had absolutely no input into the content of this review, nor have they seen it before you. Here they are, the SV23s, and they're a pair of open back dynamic driver headphones retailing at $449, which puts them a little bit above the HD660S and quite a lot above the Sundaras. For that money, you get the cans themselves, which we'll look at closely in a minute. You get a cable, which is a 4.4mm balanced audio cable, and you also get a 4.4 to 3.5mm adapter and a 6.35mm adapter. So you've got all the connectivity bases covered, unless you're after a 2.5mm balanced connection. You also get this interesting shaped case, shall we say, which I could only describe perhaps as being butt ugly. The cans themselves, thankfully, feel really premium, as you'd hope for the $450 price. They feature these lovely walnut wood handmade, apparently, ear cups which house the driver assembly, and the drivers are 50mm drivers. The diaphragms are made from beryllium plated LCP. The headband is goat skin and it's nice and soft, with a steel top layer. Then you've got this machined aluminium suspending the ear cups themselves. It all feels pretty premium. Now the ear pads have a slightly unusual shape, you can probably see that, but they're made of some very comfy velvet covered memory foam. At just a snip over 300 grams, these headphones are reasonably light, and the clamping force on the head isn't too tight. One thing I didn't like is the sliding mechanism. It's just not that easy to precisely adjust the fit of the ear cups once they're over your ears. Overall, I think the SV23 looks stylish and pretty classy, and the supplied cable is very high quality. The only problem I have with it is that it terminates in the more unusual 2.5mm jacks rather than 3.5mm, so it might be trickier to swap the cable out in the future. I do like, however, the little spring stress reliever, which should increase the longevity of the cable. Now the worst aspect of the whole package is the aforementioned butt case, which just looks, let's face it, kind of indecent. But that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem, despite it being made well and feeling quite protective, is that you can't get the cans in the case without detaching the cable, which is a real nuisance. But remember, these are not commuter portable headphones, and I don't think you should see this as a portable case. It's a bit hefty for that. If you see it as just a storage case to keep your headphones safe when you're not using them, I guess it's not a deal breaker. In terms of driving these at 300 ohms impedance, the same as the HD650 incidentally, you're not going to easily get them to a decent volume from your smartphone or dongle DAC, and even a small portable DAC like my beloved FIO BTR5 will struggle to drive them. But they have got a reasonably high sensitivity of 105 decibels, so you don't need a monster amp either. Something like the iFi ZenCan will drive them well at the desktop, but I also managed to power them really decently with my FIO M11 Plus via the balanced output in high gain mode. Okay, on to the important bit, which of course is the sound quality. So I'd start by saying that unlike the HD650s, the SV23s aren't quite the same neutral reference listening headphones. If anything, they have a more dynamic, lively presentation, but they do have excellent detail resolution, surprisingly good sound staging, and overall it makes them a really engaging listen. So let's talk about the bass first, and if you fire up the Jamie XX remix of Sunset by the XX, now this track features some characteristic deep throbbing bass lines along with an insistent bass guitar which drives the song along. Now the SV23 demonstrates a lively but well controlled and taut bass with plenty of attack and texture. This is no bass monster set of cans, and it can't compete in that department with closed-back headsets, but it certainly has more bass presence than either the HD650 or the Sundaras, both of which have some sub-bass roll-off. Biceps Aura is another good track. It's an absolute monster of a bass test track, and on the SV23 it rumbles away happily with good sub-bass presence, but I'm happy to report that there's absolutely no mid-bass hump to my ears anyway, so the bass, although being present and really good, doesn't bleed at all into the mids. If you move away from EDM, the gorgeous acoustic bass on something like Jasmine Myra's track Horizons, that has plenty of body whilst maintaining the speed and subtlety. The mids are really clean and detailed, and in fact the detail resolution is higher than on either the Sundaras or the HD650s. Take the Smiles Panavision for example. If you listen to that track, you get every nuance of Tom York's delicate vocal and Johnny Greenwood's fabulous orchestration. It just bursts into life halfway through the track. Now I'm really looking forward to hearing the forthcoming release of the Gustavo Dudamel and LA Philharmonic's recording of the Dvorak Symphonies 7 to 9, and listening to the pre-released third movement of the 8th Symphony via Apple Music High Res on the SV23 allows you to really appreciate the scale of the orchestra and the really complex dynamics in that movement. I don't think it sounds as neutral across the mid-range, certainly not as flat as the HD650, and to my ears there is definitely a bit of a boost to the upper mids, which makes female vocals in particular quite prominent, although they never sound shrill or shouty. So for example, on Willow, the opening track from Taylor Swift's Evermore, the second album that she did from 2020, Taylor's vocals really stand out from the acoustic backing in the chorus. And if you want a really good demonstration of female vocal presence, listen to Sia's cover of I Go to Sleep, which is off her album, I think it's called Some People Have Real Problems. And as the song progresses, her increasingly anguished and lovelorn vocal tones really are emphasized. This also means, on the flip side, that if you're listening to jazz in particular, instruments towards the higher end of the mid-range, such as a tenor sax, might seem a little bit more pronounced, and you might not like that. Overall though, I like the mid-range tuning of the SV23, and it brings a track like, for example, Alt J's Tarot to life really nicely. It's just a really beautifully integrated and musical, for whatever that means, mid-range. You kind of know what I mean when you listen to them. The treble on the SV23 is sweet and has plenty of resolution, and it's definitely not overdone. There's plenty of air around the instruments which do not sound harsh or sibilant or fatiguing. So for example, the intricate treble-heavy percussion of Reckoner from Radiohead's In Rainbows album sounds really detailed and spacious, and you can just picture Phil Selway fidgeting away at his hi-hats. Now I mentioned the Soundstage, and I have to say that the Soundstage of the SV23 is wider and more detailed than either the HD650 or the Sundara, to my ears anyway, and imaging is also very good. Interestingly, I thought my particular set of the SV23s had just a very slight channel imbalance. Both myself and my daughter noticed that, and in fact the left ear cup sounded just a little bit louder than the right, but it was very subtle. It was noticeable though when comparing it directly to the HD650s, and my pair of those is absolutely perfectly balanced. I hope this is just a minor QC issue affecting my set though. I have emailed SIVGA to comment on this, and I'll update the comments if I get a reply. Let's talk about instrumental timbre, and it's generally very good, with acoustic instruments in particular sounding quite natural, although if we're talking really fine differences, I'd probably have to give it to the HD650 as sounding slightly more natural and lacking in artificial metallic tones, particularly to the hi-hats and cymbals. It's not to say that the SV23 sounds sibilant or artificial at all, but I think the HD650 just shades it. So to summarise then, I really like the SV23s. They just add, to my ears anyway, the right amount of seasoning to the bass, and they balance this with a nice spicy upper mid uplift to give a slightly more lively and dynamic sound. And they combine that with excellent resolution and a really decent soundstage. They're solidly built, they're comfortable, they look attractive as long as you ignore the case, and all in all, I think they're a really solid new recommendation. So if you're after a more laid-back, flat reference pair of open backs, still go for the HD650 or the Sundaras, but I think a lot of people are going to like the slightly more engaging, lively sound of the SV23. I'm happy to award these, in fact, the Audio Fixation Silver Award. As you know, Audio Fixation Awards are hard to come by, so silver is a really good result, and yeah, really enjoyed these. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and watch out for more videos coming up very soon.